Hello, hello, hello. How's everybody doing today? Let me know if you can hear everything all right. If you guys can hear my voice, uh, put a V in the chat. Today we're gonna be working on a song that I've been working on for basically since what is that? Uh, yeah, so that would be July 25th, 2019. So this song is a pretty. That's when I first started this song. So this is a pretty long time going into the song. I probably spent probably like a couple hundred hours on this one so far. And I finally think I'm to the point where the song is finished production wise. It may do a little bit of changes here and there, but the bulk of the work is done. So today we're going to be going over how to actually mix a song like this down. So the song is already kind of mixed because I usually mix as I work. So a lot of the smaller detail stuff is done. But I do need to gain stage it. And I do need to like make sure that my levels are right, make sure that my 3D panning space is good, and of course making sure all the drums are hitting. So this is the song. This is actually an older version of it here, just so you guys can hear the before. Also, I'm going to be watching the chat, so just comment on the chat if you guys have specific questions about how I did certain things. Yeah, and then it goes to like a psytrance part here. And this part's a little bit different in the newer version. Yeah, the old version doesn't have psytrance there, but the new version has psytrance there. And I kind of switch genres a lot during this song. But yeah, that's the basic gist of it. This one is a lot more typical of my style, that like hybrid trap style. As some of you know, I was one of the earliest people making like trap music, mixing it with dubstep and mixing it with club music, and like bringing like heavy bass design sounds to Moombaton and trap. So yeah, a lot of the sound design is already done. And you can see I have a lot of tracks frozen, and I do that mostly to save on CPU. And especially before I get into the mix down phase, I try to turn everything, almost everything, into audio. So some stuff it doesn't really matter because it's not too CPU heavy. Hey Brett, nice to see you, dude. But yeah, so for example, like this is not very CPU heavy. It's just like a. That's that Air Effects device that I use on pretty much every song. So you guys are probably, if you've heard my songs before, you're probably used to that sound. But it's just an operator with a white noise and reverb, frequency shifter, and a delay. And there's a filter on the delay. So yeah. But yeah. Yes. Hold on a second. Let me put this on Do Not Disturb so you guys aren't reading my text messages. So yeah. First things first, when I go into the mix down process, is I remove unnecessary things, or I remove things that I know aren't being used. You may not necessarily need to delete every single like frozen file, but like stuff like that where it's I'm clearly not using it, it's not doing anything, you can delete. So stuff like this, I'm not using any of these, so I'm gonna delete those. You do have to be careful when you're deleting things because sometimes it will change your automations. It looks like this track is straight up muted, so I'm just gonna delete that because I'm not using that track. And this is something that's useful too if you are sending your music off to an engineer, whether it's a mix engineer or a mastering engineer. It's always good to just delete extraneous tracks because I mix songs for other people, and there's been times where I get this huge file, this like I don't know 15 gig file, and then I go through each stem, and some of the stems are completely silent. So A, that's wasted data, and then B, that's wasting my time because now I'm trying to listen to all these different files that don't have any information in it. So I always go through and like delete, for example, like this track that has nothing on it, and just incrementally go through each one. So like this one's not being used. What's this? These are being used. Yeah. So yeah, those are all being used. This one doesn't look like it's being used. Yeah, that sounds like an earlier version of that. So I'm gonna delete that. And let's just start at the top. These are my sidechain inputs. I'm not gonna mess with those. That's my reference track, like the original production. This track looks empty, I believe. Yes, I'm gonna delete that. And then I have my kick drum here with the 808, another bass drum, another bass drum. This one though is muted, and it seems like it's not something I'm using. Ooh, that's a heavy kick. I'm wondering if I'm using that as a layer maybe. And then let's hear it with that other kick. Yeah, that may just be a layered kick. But since this layered kick already has, or the kick with the other elements in the kick already have like a very heavy low end there, and then I have like a punchiness there, but still low endy. I think I was using this as a top layer to the kick because it almost sounds like it has like a hi-hat at the top of it. And so this is kind of me knowing myself and knowing what I was intending to do. So I'm not going to delete this, and I'm just going to use that top end. I will delete these two audio tracks, however. And so I'm going to EQ this, just pull out all the low end and just keep the click of the kick. And I'm going to turn off all the other EQs because I'm not using those. So this is almost just like a hi-hat, but then when we hear it all together, yeah, so all together that is working. And then I'm also going to freeze this. Part of the reason I'm freezing it is to save on CPU as well, because now that I'm shifting from music production into mixing, I'm going to be putting more plugins and more higher quality plugins onto it. So I want to conserve as much CPU as possible. And it's a pretty good sign that when my computer's idling, it's at like 5-6%. So I'm not really pushing the CPU yet. It's peaking at like 35. And then I'm just going to call this top so I know what it is. All right, so there's that. That's just the bass drum. And then here we have the snare. So here, got like a dubstep slash trap snare here, and then a trap snare as the build up here. All right, and then we got hi-hats here with a little swing on them. This snare rolls track is frozen, but I don't see any audio on it. I don't know why I did that, because usually I have a lot of snare rolls in my tracks, so that may be something where I can add in some snares and stuff like that in it. So there's the hi-hat, and then here's the percussion rack. So usually in percussion, I include like rides, crashes, all the cymbals and stuff like that, claps, stuff that is basically not the kick and the snare, but still a drum. So like toms, I'll include. And then here's percussion fills. Yeah, so that's like a bunch of congos and toms. That used to be a MIDI track. I actually put a bunch of toms and stuff like that on a MIDI track. And then on the MIDI track, I put a arpeggiator so that it would trigger a bunch of different hits, basically. And then I have a bunch of panning automation. And then got some build up. And then what's this track? That track is nothing, so I'm going to delete it. And then this contact patch, I believe, is that orchestral, like, timpani. Or it was. Yeah, that patch is empty now. But that should be that, like, yeah, these orchestral drums down here. I also do that a lot where I have like the input track, like this contact. This should actually be down here. Because I have like the contact patch in there, and then I just do a pass of the contact patch, and then I record it into an audio track, and then I have that forever, and then I can play around in contact and change a bunch of things and do whatever, but I still have that initial recording. And then I just did that a bunch of times. And then you just set the input here to contact, and then just do a bunch of passes. And then, so that's how you can hear, like if we listen to the whole orchestral section. Yeah. So yeah, that's the orchestral section, but since I'm not using contact anymore, I'm going to delete it. It's not needed. And you can see this is all inside the drums group, because in Ableton 10, it allows you to group groups inside of groups. So that's why I have like a bass drum group, a snare drum group, a hi-hat group, percussion rack group, or percussion group. And then this is another just like miscellaneous drums group. So there's like this. So there's that break that's happening. And then there's these little like percussion fills that are happening in there. So there's that drum group. And then this is the orchestral drums group. And that's what we just heard. This looks like it's another extraneous audio track. So let me delete that. So yeah, in just the drums, I kind of, before I start mixing, I will do this organization step, because then it makes mixing that much more easy, because then I'm not looking for stuff and I'm not wasting time looking for stuff. It's just sitting there. And yeah, so putting it into groups makes it a lot easier, and that also helps with gain staging, so that I know like the bass and the snare are louder than everything else. And then if I listen to the whole drum group by itself, that's what I want. And I do this, I usually incrementally listen to each group of instrumentation. So, like the drums, I usually always start with the drums because that's where, that's kind of like the backbone of the song that everything else is built off of. And that tends to be, hold on one second. Yeah. So yeah, that tends to be what the backbone of the song is, the drums. So that's why I always start there. I always start paying attention the most and focusing the most on the drums, and then I move on to the bass, because in bass music, that tends to be what people focus on. All right. You. So this section, this is my bass group. I also like color coding things. So I tend to make drums like some sort of either a darker color or a more neutral color. I like my basses purple. And then for chords and like melodies and stuff like that, and even vocals, I'll make them a lighter color. That way I can just know immediately. I don't have like a specific color coding system that I always go by, but I tend to make bass sounds. Hey, Sterling, thanks for the like. And I tend to use my bass sounds as leads too. So I tend to only use purple for the bass so that I know immediately when I open the session up what my bass sounds are. And then I always do effects white because effects are just like almost an extraneous part of the song. The vocals are down here. These vocals are not as like heavily processed as like if you were a singer and you had like a vocalist on the song. It's more so all the processing you see is more for like effects so that the vocals sound trippy and like spaced out. So there's a lot of like delay. And I even have a I even have like a small grain delay happening on it just to make the vocals a little bit trippier. The chords, I have them split into sections. So I have the drop chords here. What's in this? This is just one sound in here. I split these probably because I didn't want the processing that I have on all of my basses to be on this bass. So I split this bass sound into a separate group. And I also do that a lot where I process all of my bass sounds with the same processing. And I'm just going through to make sure. Let's open this group up. Just going through to make sure there's no extraneous tracks. So this one looks extraneous. Let's hear it though. So there's that side trance, the side trance donk. But I already have a bunch of different layers on that side trance bass, so I'm not going to use that. I also don't change notes. So I'm pretty sure that's like an earlier iteration of when I was experimenting with the side trance sound. And then I'm just listening to the groove. So yeah, there's even processing on this group. There's an OTT on it, and that's just to bring out the really small details in the bass sounds. There's an 808 here, but it looks like all of the. Oh, okay. It's here. So I'm gonna delete this section because we're not using it there, and we're not using it here. All right, so especially when I have multiple different basses happening, you kind of have to pick which one is going to be the sub. So for this one, I picked the 808 during this section, but for example, during the sidetrance section, the like low end is really coming from the kick. And there is like a rolling low end, and this is heavily sidechained. So that's where the basses are coming from. Although that is like a mixing decision, that's also like an arrangement decision. By not putting in an 808 in this section or any sort of like sub, like a dedicated sub in that section, then I'm kind of getting rid of the problem of having to fight between all the basses. And two, in my placement of these bass sounds, I'm kind of intentionally taking out the other bass sounds when another bass sound plays. So like if we hear the whole section, let's just start from the build. So yeah, you can hear in the stops and starts that are happening, they're intentional stops and starts so that I can poke in a bass here and poke in another bass there. And it obviously creates a little bit more variation so that the song isn't so linear and so static. So like there's this one plays by itself, this plays by itself, and then these go for a bit, but then they cut out in order to create space for this guy. And then what's this? These are kind of working together here. That's more of like I could have even just taken out that like growl and have it just but yeah, you can see why that's layered because it doesn't feel as full. See, I leave little notes for myself. Play with deactivating drums and bass group here. So that's partly how I got some of these fills and stuff like that. So I can actually delete that because I did that. And then also that's why I label things too, so that I know what part of the song it is and like what I was thinking when I was working on it. That's the bass group. This down here, this is that like the like womp sound, and then this is the like main almost 808 bass for the first drop. But it's also a very high endy bass, and part of the reason why it's so high end the way that I made it is that it's just a saw wave, and saw waves have a lot of higher harmonics in it, but I also have the AC, the white noise coming through to create that like at the high end of it, and that's just to give give it a more like talking type sound. And then I put from FM8, I put the talk wah sound on it. That's why it's like wah. Yeah. And I'm going to delete that chorus. I'm not going to use that on this sound. Looks like I have two. Do I need both of these? I don't know why I have two. I have these, I call them splitters, because they're splitting the sound into its 3 EQ spaces, so high, mids, and lows. So then I have, this is just the highs, this is just the mids, and this is just the lows. And then on the actual highs, mids, and lows, I have an EQ3, which is doing the splitting, and then utility, which is making this mono. This is kind of unnecessary. You can see that I made this in an older version of Ableton, because now Ableton inside of utility, they have the bass mono switch, so you can just turn that on. That's why it says upgrade on all these. And on this one's pretty much the same thing. That's why I'm wondering, do I need both? I feel like I don't, but yeah. Let me compare the two sounds. So this is without the first one, and then this is with the first one. So this one widens out the high end a little bit. That's what I'm noticing. And that's because I have a delay here. And that delay, it's literally delaying the right ear by 10 milliseconds. So that's what's happening there. And that's what's happening here too, but it's delaying the left by 21 milliseconds. So they're pretty much the same thing. I'm going to set this to 10 milliseconds, and then maybe we can get rid of this one. Okay, just making sure that's set to 250. Yeah, I think that's the only difference. This one does seem to make it seem a little bit louder to me, or a little bit wider on the high end, which is kind of what I'm looking for. So I'm going to get rid of the newer one. And then kickstart, which is just side chaining, and then sausage fattener after that to fatten it up and get some distortion out of it. So that's the bass group. And thanks, Kyle, for the like. Appreciate it. This song, the BPM is 145 BPM. I don't know if you guys can see that or if my camera's in the way. But yeah, it's 145 BPM. Yeah. I'm just checking if there's any. I was just checking if there's any comments on the other streaming services, because I don't want to miss you guys' questions if you have them. So yeah, that's all the bass group. Then there's this bass, which is living by itself. Yeah, I think this is necessary. Yeah, so part of the reason why this EQ is here, let me make sure it's an oversampling, is because it's too subby to the point where it's like distorting and doesn't really sound that great. It's like, And this sounds a lot cleaner. And you can see the placement of the EQ is on the super hard peaks, and that's just to take away some of that, some of the not good distortion. And then I have the hiss erosion on it. This I think was here to adjust the volume, because when you pull a lot of volume out of different frequencies, you might have to compensate for that by turning it back up. I don't think that's necessary, so I'm gonna leave that. And let's move on to the chords. The chords are from a sample, and I just really like affected the samples heavily, and like changed the transpose of them, and then resampled them, and did all kinds of stuff like this. And I stretched them out, and I transposed them to different keys, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what's happening with these guys. So there's no chords during that whole section. And then the chords come in for the bridge, the club part, and then the outro. So they come in here. This one is heavily affected. I think with this one, I actually used if I'm remembering correctly, I think I used manipulator or some sort of vocoder to create those weird, just to create something interesting. Even though it is, some of it is out of key, it just sounds really cool to me in context with everything else. So that's one thing too, is when you're mixing, sometimes things will sound either not great by themselves or they will sound amazing by themselves, but that doesn't matter in context of everything else. And I noticed some people will get bogged down like, oh, this kick drum sounds perfect, or this kick drum doesn't sound right. Let me keep adjusting it. And then when you unsolo it, your whole mix sounds different now, because you spent so much time focusing on one sound. And the key to a good mix is not having a great kick drum sounding by itself, or a great, like, for example, this weird melody thing that I added in. By itself, it sounds weird, but in context, it makes more sense. So yeah, that's the whole point, is in context, when you hear everything together, it starts to sound better. Yeah, so there's that. Those are the chords group, and then the leads group. So the leads are kind of, I call them leads because they're not really like bass sounds, although most people will call them basses. And I made a lot of them in Serum. So yeah, that's what these are, leads though, because they're not really like bass sounds per se. They're more just like the lead synth. And then there goes, this is the, from the last song, that from the last live stream, this is the same Squawks Chug. that my co-founder of Bass Tap Records and one of my best friends in the world, Squirm Sound, made these. So these are his, like, that's why it says squawks. And these are like the chug sounds that, and then I just combine them so that they make one sound. So they're layered together inside of this chain. And then inside the chain, or inside each serum, I have different processing, but then on the whole thing, I have it EQ'd so that there's no sub in it. And there still is a little bit of low end to give it some beef, but then I have it boosted in the mids and in the high mids, so that it pokes out in front of all the bass sounds that are happening. Because these bass sounds, they're bassy. They're very bassy. They do have some high end, but you can hear in the mix that these lead sounds poke through really well. Hey, Kyle, thanks for the follow, dude. So these lead sounds poke through the mix because of the fact that I scooped out in the bass groups. I scooped out the space for that, and you can see if I go to this main bass that's playing, you can see I pushed down in that same frequency range in the mids so that these now have space. And then this is that Say My Name. That's why it's called Say His Name. This is that Say My Name, the like super saw sound that he basically made in making hard trap. So I'm kind of taking that sound and then infusing it into my style. One thing too, though, that this is more of like I guess this is halfway between a sound design tip and a mixing tip. So this synth by itself isn't very like punchy, even though it's a really high-endy synth. It's not very like hitting you. So I added in a hi-hat as a layer, so that when you hear this by itself, it has a little bit of a tick at the beginning, and it has a little bit of a like hit at the beginning of the synth sound, so that the synth sound punches through everything else. So it's really, really pushing it forward in the mix. I could even turn that up. Yeah. And I'm gonna pull this down a little bit more because it's kind of hurting my ears. Is it hurting your guys' ears? Oh, I didn't do on the BPM because Pablo asked me. On the BPM, I didn't do 150 because I have that club section here, and then I have the psytrance section here. And a lot of psytrance is like 140. And a lot of club music is between 130 to like 140. So that's why I was trying to kind of fuse these multiple genres. And then I found like 145 is kind of like a nice midpoint. It's like splitting the difference between like typical club music, typical psytrance, and then trap. So it's kind of in between all of those BPMs. So it's slower than trap usually is, but faster than club music, and kind of sitting in the comfortable range for psytrance. And then also still slightly faster than most dubstep is, because dubstep is around 140. I'm going to save. Then we also have this reactor patch that I froze. And I froze it because Reactor is a super CPU heavy plugin. So I froze that. And I froze it including all the automation and the reverb and stuff like that. So that's why it sounds this way. And then so yeah, there's the lead vocal thing, and I use that in, excuse me, in the build-ups to kind of build some suspense. But then I also used it in the club section because that's something that happens with vocals a lot in club music, especially in Jersey club. I'm gonna delete that other track because there was nothing on it, and then yeah, so that's partly why the BPM is 145. Because if I was faster, if I was doing like 150 or even up to 160, I feel like this section would be too fast and almost like not danceable fast. But then if it was slower, then like the trap parts would feel a little bit too slow to me. So like if I set it to like, I don't know, 135 for like a club feel to it. Yeah, so like that club part sounds tight, but then this part it feels too slow. It feels like it feels like it's in slow motion. And then like I feel like the side trance part feels slow because I'm used to it being faster, but that could still work as side trance. So that BPM only really works for the club section. And then at 140, I just wanted it to be faster than 140. Yeah. So like I found 145 because I was like, I kind of like 140. But I feel like slightly faster without going too fast to the point where the club sounds weird. The club section sounds weird. So I felt like 145 was like a nice medium. And then yeah. So we got, that's the leads group. So far we've gone over drums, bass, chords, leads. This instruments section, this has a lot of that in it. So this is stuff that like I didn't really know. It didn't really fit into like leads. It didn't fit into chords. It didn't fit into the bass. So it's a lot of that. This whisper could almost be an effect. And then here, this sound is not being used. Oh, it is being used, but I treated it and then resampled it to the Vox chop down here. So I'm not using that top track. You can barely hear these whispers. The wait. And then it says squeak here, but I don't see anything on this track. Yeah, so I'm going to delete that because it doesn't look like it has anything. So yeah, that's the instrument section. The vocal section, the Vox, is all the like almost like ad libs that you're hearing. Yeah. Bro. And then also like the song's namesake, Brat. And then when I switch to trance. Also too, this is my voice. Some of these are not samples. Some of these are just me recording myself. Like this one. So yeah, if you're looking for vocals and if you're looking for unique vocals, just record yourself and then put a bunch of effects on it. Yeah. And then you'll have your own vocal and you'll have your own unique vocal. So yeah, there's that one. That one's a Fox Wave sample. And then there's me saying switch it up again. Yeah, so those are all the vocals and then the effects channel. So the effects, in some people's songs I hear effects really, really, really loud. It's like, and effects are not something that should be really loud. It's more like an energetic thing. So they shouldn't be something that's like, oh, I can really hear that in the background. It should be like tucked in so that it's there, but it's more contributing to like the energy of the song and not necessarily taking over. I gotta pause for a second because I have to use the bathroom, but BRB. Let's do this. Oh. All right. Hello, hello. Not gone too long. All right, so yeah, so the effects channels, you don't want them too loud. You just want them to be audible so that they contribute to the energy, the overall energy of the song. See, like how that's there, but it's not like taking over. That's what you want. And then I also have this, which is this is something that was kind of an accident, but you know how that reverb is just like extended out during that section? I forgot what happened, but something happened in Ableton where it got stuck just playing that over and over and over, and it created this feedback loop in my interface, and I just so happened to be able to record it, so I recorded the feedback loop, and it sounds pretty tight. Could even turn it up a little. Okay, so I have all the different elements. This feedback could even be tucked in with this effects group. I'm gonna do that. When you do include things in groups, though, you do have to make sure that the volume is still the same. Because that just change your gain staging a little bit when you add them to groups, because there may be group processing or the group volume level may be different. So you do have to make sure that when you put it into a group that you're still the volume is still reading in the same volume. I'm gonna make that white too. Let's color code everything. So yeah, those are all the elements of the song. Um, at this point, now we have everything. We've checked. We've gotten rid of all the extraneous stuff. The levels are pretty okay, but everything is really loud. And usually before it mix down, let me turn off the master that's on here. Let's turn that off. Turn that off. Before I mix down, I usually make a song into like a pre-master rack that I have on my master because I like hearing it loud and I want to kind of hear the finished product. But I also don't want to for my mix to sound completely different. So as I'm making the song, I'll often turn this stuff off. That's why it's all in like one device. Let me put that inside there too. And that's not being used. Delete that. And this is going to be similar to what my master rack is anyways. Let's put that all in one rack. There we go. Turn it off. And then I just have a listen through to the whole way. Often, though, I'll look at these volume levels, and that way I can make sure that the groups themselves aren't clipping. I'm not really too worried about the individual tracks clipping, especially when I'm making like a heavy bass dubstep song, because Ableton is pretty good about clipping the individual about not hearing the clipping on the individual channels. But when you clip on the bus outputs like this, it will often lead to clipping the master, and that's the type of clipping that you're gonna hear. So I'm just gonna listen to. I usually listen to the loudest parts too. So yeah, the key when you're mixing is to make sure that everything is clearly audible. So like when you're listening back to it, you want to hear all the vocals, all the small details. You want to make sure that you can hear everything clearly in your mix. That's the whole point of doing a mix down, is that every element in the song that you want heard is getting heard. So then we have this part. So one thing I'm hearing, this is one of the mix problems that I'm hearing. Let me just focus on this section. So let's just hear, since this is really just like a drums and bass section, what I'm hearing is a fighting between the bass drum and these psytrance drums here. So and then let me look for the side chains. No, here they are. So the side chains are no longer triggering because these sidechain inputs are no longer routed the same way. Because I had the bass drum initially was just a MIDI track, and then that MIDI track was triggering these MIDI tracks. That's why it's set to in. But now that triggering is not happening for some reason. So I need to figure out why. It seems to be set up correctly. Let me see. Pre-effects maybe? Yeah, there it is. There it is. And now you can hear the sidechain, the ducking happening. And that's partly what the main reason why I use ducking, or why I use, hold on 1 second. That's partly why I use sidechaining, is to, when there is fighting between bass sounds, is to just completely duck one out of the way of the other. Another thing though that's happening that I don't like is the low end of this is kind of taking over the low end of this. And I don't want them fighting. So what I'm gonna do is kind of tame this bass drum a little bit more so that it's a little tighter. So it's not leaking into, because both sounds are, because these sounds down here are really short. So if the bass is still like flowing into it, that's how you get that messiness. So I'm just gonna tighten this up. I'm just pulling down on the decay of the kick so that it's not like an 808 type kick. Yeah, so now you can hear it's a lot tighter instead of this. And then that should clean it up a little bit. So that's all the kick drum together, and then this is the side trance basses together. And already that sounds a lot cleaner. All right, cool. And I'm just going to freeze this because I like how that sounds. So I'm just going to lock it into place. And then Ableton doesn't have to worry about calculating. Hold on 1 second. All right, so I'm going to freeze this. You see it? And then that's going to be the kick for here. All right, so that sounds pretty good. Everything honestly sounds pretty level. And then if I go and check my volume levels over here, wait, let me hear everything. So right now I'm maxing out at about -5 dB. On my master. All right, then let's go to the club part. All right, so everything's generally. She's about to do her PE. So yeah, these different groups are pretty leveled off to me right now. One thing that I like doing just to ensure that everything sounds clean is putting an EQ on the entire group. So like for example, this chords group. In the chords group, there's nothing that needs like a sub in it or anything really low indie. So I would grab an EQ. Let me put it at the very beginning. And then just make sure that everything below about 200 hertz is turned down or even cut off. I usually won't completely cut it off because maybe there is some sort of low end that's building up, that's adding to the energy of the track. So sometimes I won't just like straight up cut it off. See, like there's low end in there. It sounds to me though that like we don't really need that, so I'm gonna put a cutoff at like 90, 100. That way we're not getting any muddiness. We're not even like chancing getting muddiness from our low end through that. And then I'm just gonna copy that and paste it to the other tracks or to the other groups. All right. See, this one may need some low end. Actually, no, it doesn't sound bad. Neither of those really need low end. That definitely doesn't need low end. I don't know if that needs low end. So, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I'm going to push this down a little bit, but I don't want subs out of this. And then again, with this one, just going to paste that EQ again because these are instruments. These don't have low end. And then same thing with the vocals. Paste that at the very beginning. And the effects, I'm going to leave the effects. I'm not going to EQ them because the effects do have some low end in them. Like there's like explosions and like and things like that that I want to have low end in it. And for example, like this like synthy build up thing. Yeah, so I'm not going to cut off the low end on the effects group. So next step, now that I have everything kind of leveled, not everybody does this like this, but I like doing it this way because it gets me to see my entirety of the tracks. And you can also kind of leave it the way that it is because it essentially is that already, but I like creating just bus channels for each of these. So I want to make them red. And this is how we do a lot of the mixing for the tracks that come on our label because it allows us to gain stage things very quickly and without having to like export audio and stuff like that. And let's save this. And I usually save a new version of the song, like just save a new session and just rename it something else before this step. So I'm gonna do save. I'm just gonna call this premaster. And then each of these tracks is now gonna act as basically a stem of the whole group. So this is gonna be the drum group. This is gonna be the bass group. And I'm also gonna this is the chords group. And this is the leads group. And then this is the vocals group. And then let's add one more. Duplicate. And then that's going to be the effects group. So it's basically what these groups already are. I hit duplicate too much. It's what they already are. Like the outputs are already like this, but I just record them into audio. And then now I'll have individual pieces of audio. Another thing you could do too is just select the audio of the track, and then select the groups like so, and then go to export and then do selected tracks. So then you will be exporting the group by itself. So yeah, I do it like that sometimes too. And either way, they're pretty much the same thing. This way, I just see it like happening in real time. So I set it to input, and then I set this output of the drums group to the input of this. So then I just go here and then go to drums. Boom. And I want it to be post mixer because I want it to be exactly what I'm hearing. And then bass G. Let's go there. And then chords. Where is it? Hey, thanks for the share, Ed. Appreciate it. Where is it? Where is this thing? Chords G, there it is. And then the leads G. The leads G and the instrument group, I'm going to make them both go into here. So I'm going to set these outputs. Instead of it going out to the master, I'm going to set it to go out to the lead G. So now you can see it says track in. And then here, it's just going to accept whatever audio is being sent in. So if I play the leads group and the instruments group, you can see it's just coming in to here now because I set the output to that. And then the vocal group, we can set that here. Box. Is that the right one? I don't know. I have too many things labeled the same thing. Yeah, that's right. And then effects group. That should be easy. Effects group. All right, boom. And then now I just let it roll one time through. Let me see how it ends, or when it ends, I should say. So there is a trail of reverb till there. And then, yeah, record it. Boop. And then mostly I'm doing this so that I can see the tracks. So I'm going to hold shift, do that. And I'm going to turn the mutes off. What are those? Whoa.
Music.
Nice.
For you.
Thank you. You guys, my girlfriend just bought a bunch of cassettes. Cassettes and vinyl. Yeah. Golden Age of Rhythm and Blues.
Please.
Eric Clapton. What is this? Eat It. Nice, nice. Bo Diddley. I also, some of you guys may have seen this already, but I also got a old school Fostex tape recorder. That's like a 4-track tape recorder, and I use it a lot in the more like chill vibey stuff that I make because it gives it like a texture to it that you just can't get from a plugin. Like it sounds really dope, and you can't like really clip analog tape. It just gets more saturated and distorted, and it sounds nice. All right, so we're just gonna hit record on this, and I'm gonna do the pre and post roll so that it stops recording right there. Hey, thanks for the like, Ed. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for the food. All right, live stream's over. Woo. Food's here. Yeah. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm missing sounds. I'm just gonna let it keep recording because the sounds that are missing are the leads group and the instruments group, and you can see they're getting recorded in, so I'm not gonna stop the recording. We just can't hear them because everything else is routed to the master, and we just have these set up as inputs. That's why I muted them, because it would create a feedback loop. So yeah, we just can't hear it right now, but we will once the recording is done. Hey, what's up, Richard? Thanks for the like, dude. I'm actually hearing that feedback sound again. Oh, that's on purpose. Okay. That may be something I want to turn down a little bit. We'll hear though. If it's like distractingly loud, then I'll turn it down. Whoa. That's trippy. That pause is so trippy. Nice. And that's it. Boom. Okay, so now I'm going to do the opposite and mute all of these and then unmute these. Because if you have them all open at the same time and you press play, you can create a feedback loop. Because this is going to the master, but this is also going to this. And then this is also going to the master. So you could create a really weird feedback loop. And that's definitely not something you want to do because you could possibly hurt your ears. I'm going to take these off of input mode, like so. And then let's have a listen. All right. Let's turn this up to 0. So these should all be at 0 because I recorded them in post mixer. So this volume level is actually going to be quieter because it was recorded in quieter. And everything's really dry because I'm not using the sends right now. The volume of this could actually come up some. Yeah, so now you can see everything. And then we're hearing that lead that we couldn't hear because I sent 2 separate groups into the same bus. So now we're hearing it. It sounds good. I'm just hearing everything. Also, I like comparing it to the original. So yeah, these are very They're pretty much exactly the same. Yeah, they're exactly the same. That's what we want. I heard a little. So yeah, stuff like that. That's why I do this, because I wouldn't have heard that otherwise. Yeah, it's in there. Drums sound good. And now you guys can see why when some of the individual channels were clipping, but now when you're looking at the whole group by itself, you can see that the clipping on the individual channels didn't really matter, because as I'm looking at these maximum volumes here, like the drums, which should be the loudest, are at -6. The bass group, which should be the second loudest, is at -9. The lead group is actually, the lead group should be a little bit louder than the basses. So that's at -5, which may be a little bit too loud. And then when that's just my eyes telling me that. But when I listen, when I hear it, it doesn't necessarily seem like the leads are louder than the Whoa, something's missing right there. Aha, this is missing. So that is something that should be going into this bass group. So let me go up here. That's also missing from this section. So just for this part, these two parts, I should say, I'm going to re-record so that this Reese bass can get in there. The way I'm going to do that is by setting the output of this to the input of the bass group. So instead of it saying master, go down here and put it to that, because that's missing from 2 spots or 3 spots. So I need to make sure that it's in all of those. And then just hit record. I'm not hearing it. Oh, it's muted. There we go. All right. And I'll put it to auto. All right, so that's there, and then we need it here. And I do this a lot because the post roll, so that I only record what I want to record and nothing else gets affected. Like that. And then now for this whole section, boom, done. All right, so now everything's in there. Everything. Save. So yeah, this is the whole song basically. And I tend to do a little bit of treatment to these groups. Let me save. And then let me see if I don't even think I'm really using the sends in this song. I think all of the like reverb and stuff is on the individual tracks. So because I saved this new premaster and I've reviewed it and I've heard everything and I made sure that all the different elements are in there, I can now get rid of all the rest of this stuff. Boom. And I'm even going to delete the sends because I'm not really using them. And once Ableton processes that I'm deleting most of the session, then we have, now we've reduced all the, I think it was like 80 something tracks into these main elements. So 1, 2, 3, 6 elements. And then now all my focus is on these. And my focus is on these, and so is Ableton's. So for the drums, this drum sound great. Honestly, at this point, it doesn't need much processing. A lot of it is just making sure that the level is, that the dynamics are very even across all the different sounds. And that's how you get really loud, like really loud sounding masters. So for example, this leads section, I knew this would happen, but these lead sections are very dynamic. And by dynamic, I mean the quiet sounds are far away from the loud sounds. And so I want them to be slightly less dynamic. And I think Pablo said, hey, thanks, Ed. I think Pablo said that, score. Thanks, Goosetronics. Pablo said to put the glue compressor on, and he's 100,000% correct. So the glue compressor, that's what I'm going to do here. And I'm not going to necessarily use it to make things louder. Oh, I already have a glue compressor on there. I'm not going to use it to necessarily make things louder. I'm just doing it to even out the sound. So you see how like this is much louder than this over here, and like this is louder than this over here. So I'm just basically trying to like, not like brick things out like that. I'm just trying to like even them out. So for example, the lead basses, you can see, even though there are some very quiet sections in here, you can see that there's nothing that goes above a specific volume level. And you can do that by limiting, but I like my sounds to sound a little bit more smooth, and that smoothness you can get out of the glue compressor. So just fast attack, slow release, and then keep the ratio low, and then pull the threshold down, and then that'll have the effect of smoothing out things. And I'm gonna do the makeup gain. So the makeup gain, just read where the needle is and set the makeup gain to about there. So this is like 6. And I'm gonna turn on soft clip. And I often do this too, just to ensure that my gains are 100% good. I'll just turn the outputs down of everything that isn't the drums, because then for sure, my drums are slapping. I'm guaranteed to have slapping drums if they're slightly louder. And I mean slightly. I don't mean like 3 decibels is slightly. I don't mean like turn everything completely down so that your drums can pop through. And I already have some side chaining happening, so the drums will hit that much harder. There we go. One thing about the drums too is you still want your drums to be pretty dynamic. That's how you get drums that hit really hard, is the transient of the drum is definitely louder than the end. That's how you get really punchy drums. Another thing that I do is, that's why I have these split into these sections. You can already kind of see it in my volume levels in the waveform, but the drop drums like this here, So like this section, and this section. Wait, this section. You can already see that the drums are a little bit louder than like these drums or these drums or the outro drums. The beginning build drums, they're just as loud as the drop drums, but that's kind of intentional because I wanted the beginning to be like high energy and like come in, punch you in the face. But I kind of intentionally make the build drums quieter than the drop drums because the drop hits harder. It's always easier to take something away than it is to keep adding on to something. So in the build section and like in this bridge section, I just made the drums significantly quieter. And then let's look at our outputs. And then let's go to the club section. I could almost make the vocals group a little bit louder. I'm going to turn the vocals group back up to 0. And I'm going to compress it too, so I can seem a little louder. Because vocals are something that people attach onto in songs. So if they're not loud enough, people won't know what was said. And just because you know what it says doesn't mean someone who's never heard the song before knows what it says. So you want to make sure your vocals are loud enough. Yeah. All right. All right, we're hitting -3. All right, so we got about 3 dB of headroom, between like -6 to -3 dB of headroom, which is pretty good. Something that I do too is I'll just grab a utility. You guys already saw this. And just put utility before it to give myself more headroom. And when your individual channels aren't clipping and your audio itself isn't clipping, like nothing's too loud, that's totally fine to do. I know it's like a no-no for some people not putting a utility on the master, but that's the same thing as if you're, part of the reason why I'm mentioning the individual channels is if your input is too loud, no matter how much you turn the output down, it's not going to stop it from distorting. So when your input isn't distorting, then you can turn the output down and it's just literally just going to turn it down. But if it's really loud coming in, you're just going to be turning down something that's distorted. It still is going to sound distorted. So that's why a lot of people say like putting a utility on the master is like a no-no, because that may mean that your track is clipping going into the master and you want to just turn down the clipping first before you do anything to the master. But we're not clipping anywhere, so this is totally fine to do. And all that's doing is just giving me more space to make it even louder. It doesn't necessarily need to be -18 dB quiet, but the more headroom you have, the louder it can be. So I have an EQ here. This is like my pre-master master rack. Make sure your EQ isn't oversampling. It's in mid-side mode, so there's a mono channel. And then there's a stereo channel. And the stereo channel has all of the like higher frequency things. That's why I have it cut off so high, because I don't need my subs to be out in the sides. I need my subs to be mono, and this helps with that. And I also already did that in the mix when I set the utility to mono on the low end. So my sub already is mono, and then in the mastering phase, using this mid side technique, I'm also ensuring that my sub is still in mono. And then I'm cutting off everything below 30 hertz, because that tends to be where things get muddy. And also humans can't really hear 20 hertz. Most people can't hear that. That's more something that you feel. And so I'm just cutting it off on the super low lows. Also in certain playback systems, especially older ones, when you get into those super low frequencies, it just distorts. So like if you're playing on an older car or something like that, it's just going to distort. It's not going to sound good. And part of mastering is to make sure it sounds good on a bunch of different playback systems. And then I have a little bit of boost in the high end just to give it some shimmer. And yeah, that's pretty much it. When you're doing mastering, you don't want to do too much correction, because if you're correcting it a lot in the mastering, that means you need to go back to the mix and fix it in the mix. Let's hear this first drop. And then I have a multi-band compressor here. And that's just compressing the lows by themselves, the mids by themselves, and then the highs by themselves. Hey, Anthony, thanks for the follow. And then after that, this is something that I put on pretty much every single one of my like dubstep or trap, like heavy bass type sounds. And mostly it's because it's intentional distortion. So this is what I was talking about earlier. If your song isn't clipping anywhere, you can turn down the volume, and then you can introduce intentional distortion into it. So like it's on purpose. It's that distortion that sounds good. And someone who I've heard this from a lot. Thanks Goosetronics for the follow. Someone who I've heard this from a lot is Getter. So on his, I forgot what song it was. It's a crazy like trap song, like one of those like swamp trap songs. Let me just hear it. Where is it? Oh, this one, Inhaling Abuse. This one. And you can hear, well, I can hear that like distortion on the master channel. It's pretty dope. That bass is slapping. There's just like an ever so slight distortion on it, but the mix, you could tell, is a super clean mix, and then the distortion is intentionally coming from some sort of intentional distortion plugin. So it's coming from like Dynamic Tube, or maybe he had actual tubes and he ran it through like a tube compressor or a tube preamp or something like that. But that distortion is intentional because your mix, you're starting off with a really clean source sound, and then you're muddying it up intentionally. So that way it still sounds good. Because if there's distortion and you didn't do it on purpose, usually it doesn't sound very good. See, like I can push this really hard, and it still sounds pretty good. Like usually if you had a song that was really loud and already kind of distorted, you couldn't push this drive up really hard and have it still sound pretty clean. So that's partly why I went through the process before of like gain staging everything and checking each individual track by itself. And then this output is literally the output of this particular plugin. And you can see, because I have this down -12, Then I'm cutting some things out and I'm adding a little bit here. That does change volume levels a little bit. I have the output +3 here and then +6 here, which means I still can compensate for this turn down by adding another 3 dB. And if you remember, before I even added this utility, I think we were at -6 here. So I still have like another -9 dB where I could push the volume up. So I could say like, maybe this is 3 dB, maybe this is, I'm going to leave that at 6 because when you start pushing that too much, it starts sounding a little bit too distorted. And then Sausage Fattener here is not being used as a distortion plugin. It's being used as a brick wall limiter. I used it as a brick wall limiter on these, and this is what it does. It literally creates just like a line of like, do not pass. Like Sausage Fattener is like Gandalf. It's just like, you shall not pass. So yeah, that's what the Sausage Fattener is doing. But sometimes I use this limiter from Waves called the L3 Ultra Maximizer. In this case, I want it to be loud and proud because it makes it louder. And I'm just squeezing out a little bit more volume out of this. And I don't want it to pull it down, pull the threshold down really hard, because then my song will sound squashed. And you can hear how that's not listenable. So you don't want to just yank the threshold down. I hear songs like that because people think like, oh, I'm making it louder, I'm making it louder. You don't want to basically destroy all of the mix and everything that you've gotten to this point. You want to kind of pull it down to the point where there's like a sweet spot, and this is subjective. This is something that everyone hears differently, but like there's a sweet spot where you place the threshold where it sounds like the song just like opens up and comes to life. And that's usually where I set this threshold at. Sounds pretty good. And then let's hear the last drop. I don't like that. What? It sounds random. I'm gonna take it out. It's just like peace. And then do a little fade. Yeah. sounds pretty good. Let's hear it. Okay. Cool. And that's pretty much it. I usually do a little bit more in depth with my leveling for mastering, but this is a really good start to like a basic master. Like I could export this and go and play this out at a club, and it's gonna slap and it's gonna sound really good. I'm just gonna export it now. That way, I just have an export of this. Where's 0725? That's here. And then let's go to exported. And then I'm going to call this, what day is today? September 1st. September already. Lord. So yeah, that's how you do a mix, or how I like to mix things, and a really basic master. Usually for mastering, I tend to do it in multiple different places. So like I'll do it in my headphones, and then I'll also like try to get to a studio, even though it's a little bit harder now because of COVID. But then I also will sit in my car and master, and I'll just plug in the aux cable into my car. That way I can hear the master in a multiple different settings. Because of the fact that in those multiple different settings, you want your master to sound good, or you want it to sound the same. It's damn near impossible to get it to sound exactly the same in every setting, but the point of a master is to make sure that it's about the same everywhere you listen to it. And then I also will listen to it on like iPod headphones, different types of headphones. Yeah. Yeah. The Lord of the Rings reference. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm going to end it today. Tutorial Tuesday. I decided that just Tuesdays are just going to be a lot more like technical and a lot more like deep diving into things and like how to do more the engineering side. And then Thursdays are going to be more like just making music and just like chilling, hanging out. Also check out our new song that's out on Bass Tap Records now called Feelin' Right by this new DJ duo named Nuisance. They have a lot more music coming out soon, and we have a lot more music coming out soon. So yeah, I'll catch you guys